Time for another Disney book review, and this month we're storming the Magic Kingdom. Hello everybody and welcome to my Disney book review series, the series in which I talk about all the latest Disney books that I've been reading. I'd like to preface these videos by pointing out that these book reviews are not literary criticism. I'm not here to talk about how well the author crafts a story and how well they write, that sort of stuff. Not my wheelhouse. But what I do like to talk about is what these books offer in the terms of Disney knowledge for Disney history, and what kind of Disney fan might appreciate them most. And this is a really interesting book that I'm talking about this month. This is Storming the Magic Kingdom, Wall Street, the Raiders in the Battle for Disney by John Taylor. Now, this is an interesting one because this is not a new book. It's not a recent book. In fact, this book was literally published in 1987. I thought it was real interesting point in business history for a book like this to be published. It is a book in short about the very rocky times that Disney faced in the early 1980s. It saw them asking to the old guard, Rod Miller, and replacing him with Michael Eisner and Frank Wells, which was then catapulted Disney into like a mega corporation that we know today. And when it saw it was really interesting about the book's release, and that being written in 1987, it didn't have the content of what was to come for the company. We know today that Eisner and Wells was the perfect choice because they, brought back Disney's animation in the Renaissance, and they, grew the parks and added all these extra theme parks and turned this company into a behemoth, 90s. It was known as Disney's decade, but this book was none of that because it was written in the late 80s, so it really just covers the period of about a year or so where Disney was at its most bound for a hostile takeover in Wall Street. So as far as who this book is for, I would say is not for only fans like hardcore Disney fans of Disney. It's not for fans of Disney who like to know about the inner workings of the company, I would suggest this book for people who like other books such as Disney War, Work in Progress, Michael Eisner book. The one that focuses less on the creativity in Disney and more about the business. There's no mention in this book about the magic of Disney. A few references are related to how it is a hard asset and what does for the company, bottom line, and stock prices. It doesn't talk about, the magic of animation or watch dreams of storytelling, just in the content of this as a business. And so, if you're looking for that, if you want to know how genius was in the 1980s in terms of creating their films and improving on the thing parts, you're not going to get any of that. This is really about Wall Street. This is about this sort of atmosphere in the early 1980s where there was a lot of hostile takeovers of publicity traded companies, and at one point Disney, which wasn't really growing in the 70s after Walt had passed away, was the target of one of them. And so in this book is more about that battle. It was about Roy Disney trying to save the company and trying to do it by any means necessary. And that's what I found interesting, which I get into in a minute. But really it's about them trying to get rid of the current leadership, who is Ron Miller, who is Walt's son-in-law, who's running the company, and replace them with somebody new who could better run the company now. And I really enjoyed about this book. It stood out to me and made me glad that I read it. Was this book something very small that is often a footnote in these other history books, which is that Disney had rocky times with my 1980s, and they eventually put Michael Eisner in charge and expands it into this whole story, which itself is really dramatic. It's interesting. I knew what was going to happen with Disney. I know who ends up as CEO at the end of the book, yet reading it, I really didn't know how they were going to get there, because when they were at the risk of being taken over, there was a lot of different options about Disney had to try and save themselves, as some of them were really bad. Like one of the options they had considered was essentially Roy was considering borrowing money to buy Disney, which he would then have to sell off as part of it, so he might have to have sold but the theme parks to then pay off those loans. So it was essentially canvassing the company, breaking it apart just to save certain parts of it. And at one point he was interested in just buying out the movie studio, and so seeing it, all of these publicities of where Disney could have gone. It's really interesting to see how we ended up where we didn't. Now, that said, said, this is a business book. It's not an easy read. I'll be honest, towards the end of it, a lot of it got very foggy for me. There's a lot of business talking, especially Wall Street related, stock buyouts and leverage buyouts, and all this stuff that at the first the book will do a decent job of trying to explain to somebody who's not in that industry, but it would get very muddy very quickly. A lot of names thrown around that get used over and over, a lot of legal firms and stuff like that. But from a story perspective, I think it tells an interesting story, I think for any hardcore Disney fan out there, it's worth reading because this is a really critical part of Disney's history that I don't think gets a lot of coverage, noted by the fact that this is 30-year-old, and I don't think there's been a book since then that goes this into depth into what. And so check it out, Storming the Magic Kingdom by John Taylor. It's an interesting read. It's one I'm definitely glad I read. I wouldn't rank it up there with books like Disney World, Reality Land, but it's one of the more entertaining ones that I've read. Anyway, if you've read it, I'd love to hear what you think of it. If not, I'd love to hear what kind of Disney books you're into. This is something I try to do every month or so. I'm always looking for that next Disney book to read, so throw your suggestions in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. If you want to see more Disney videos, just click the subscribe button, and I do 3 videos a week, and I'll see you guys all next time for the next Disney book review. Bye, everybody.